So why don't we go ahead and get started? It's 5:01. So everyone, we want to welcome Alyssa Morris. Yay! And I first got to hear her music when I went to a double reed conference. Since she's an oboist, she's had lots of music performed at double reed conferences. She's a professor of both oboe and music theory at Kansas State University. She's also principal oboist of the Topeka Symphony. She has performed a lot throughout the United States and abroad, and she's also had lots of her works performed all over. Here's something that Fanfare magazine said about her composition. Alyssa Morris brings something that we don't always hear in the music of our time: wit. Add to this a true melodic gift, an ability to evoke a range of moods, and a strong imagination, and the result is a composer whose music is gratifying even on repeated hearings. So I think that's a nice quote. I know that Dr. Morris earned her degree from the Cincinnati Conservatory, which is also where I earned my degree. And so she studied oboe performance in all of her degrees, and then at the Cincinnati Conservatory she also studied composition. And so I'm really interested in having you talk to us about how your path as a composer evolved, especially after spending so much time on oboe. So we'll let you get started, and then we'll ask questions, and then we will get to having you evaluate the composers. So welcome.
Thank you so much. Everybody's been so kind, and I really appreciate your warm welcome to Dr. Delaplane and to everybody here. Thank you so much for hosting me. I really appreciate it. I am interested in the multifaceted career. I think because at the very beginning, when I first started music, I just had a hard time choosing which thing was my favorite. I loved playing the piano from the very beginning, but I also liked picking out my own melodies on the piano. I enjoyed playing other people's melodies and other people's pieces, but I gravitated towards starting to make up some of my own as well. So when I very first became interested in the piano, maybe like other people, I was just sort of fascinated with the instrument that was sitting there in our living room, and I would pick out little melodies and started begging my parents for piano lessons, and I promised that I would practice, and so I began studying piano, and I really did enjoy practicing, loved practicing from the very beginning, but found that I really enjoyed sort of carving out time to make up my own melodies, and my wise parents told me that I needed to make sure that I practiced all of the things that my teacher told me first, and that I could use the time at the end as a treat to sort of make up my own music at the end, but then I needed to make sure that I was dedicated to practicing what the teacher asked me to in the beginning. And maybe then I was like, but why can't I just do what I want to the whole time? But and now I realize that learning all of that wonderful repertoire was informative. It informed my compositional process, and so it was really important to study the works of masters, or just to study in the very beginning, even if you're just in the Bastian Basics book or Alfred or whatever it is, to learn fluency on the instrument, because learning fluency on the instrument helps you to become a better composer for the instrument too. So I started on piano, as I said, and I was always interested in kind of picking out my own music and making up my own music, but I started actually putting it to page probably around fourth grade or so. And we had these little competitions in elementary school called the reflections competitions, and there were different categories for visual art, for photography, for drama, and for music composition. And so I started making a goal to enter something into the reflections competition each year, and I entered my first piece and a composition in the reflections competition in fourth grade, and and it did really well. It was a solo work for piano, and kind of continued to ignite the flame to want to do it again the next year and the next year. And gradually I tried to branch out a little bit and experiment with my instrumentation. So the next year I tried something for a piano duo, and then maybe a little bit later, a couple of years later, I tried something for flute, voice, piano, and then eventually in high school I tried something for band because I played in the band. I started playing oboe in the band. In seventh grade, and initially I thought I wanted to play flute or clarinet. Seventh grade is when we in Utah when we start a band instrument, and initially I thought I wanted to start the flute or the clarinet. And my band teacher suggested, well, what do you think about the oboe? Do you want to try the oboe? And I didn't even know what it was. And so I said, well, why not? Let's try this. And I fell in love right away. And I just really enjoyed playing the oboe. I didn't know that we had to make reeds when I started the oboe, but I found that out later. It was probably good. I didn't know from the beginning because I didn't feel particularly handy, but I've learned to enjoy making reeds too. I enjoy playing on a good reed, so that means that I need to enjoy making reeds. So anyway, so I continued to enjoy playing oboe, playing piano, composing, and all three of these things were really important to me by the time I was in high school and trying to choose what I was going to do for college. I didn't know how I was going to choose because as I understood, once you go to college, you really need to focus on that one particular thing so you can become an expert in that thing. And that is true. You need to become an expert in that thing. But what I think I was a little bit blind to at the time was that all of these other things are going to help you become better at that thing too. So it's valuable to not give them up, but to try to hone them and balance them as best you can so that they can help inform that thing that becomes sort of the focal point. So um, I I decided to pursue oboe performance. But even when I entered my bachelor's degree in my first year, I still wasn't certain whether I was going to go the oboe route or the composition route because we didn't really have to choose until our second or third year. So I continued to take a lot of composition classes. And though I got an oboe performance major, I probably took enough composition courses that I was close to having a major in composition as well. It was just, I really, I found that I didn't want to have to choose. I wanted to continue to hone both. And maybe in my master's degree, I decide to do one versus the other. But I would say that um, at the end of my, with oboe being my focal point, I decided kind of my big piece up to that point, I wrote in my senior year of college. I feel like when I finally started defining my own compositional style, even though I guess I was defining it all along, but I feel like I started to really find my way and was finding my voice more when I was a senior in college. And I asked my teacher, Geraldine Giovanetti at Brigham Young University, she's my oboe professor. I asked her if it would be all right if I wrote a piece that I could play at my senior recital. And I thought this would be a fun way to, again, merge all of the different things that I love to do. And because I would be writing for oboe and piano, and then I would be composing the piece, but I would also be performing the piece. And and she was very supportive of it. And I mean, she really hadn't really heard any of my compositions before. I think she really took a leap of faith, and so I'm grateful that she did. But I mean, it could have been totally terrible as I'm looking back. I mean, what if I wrote this awful piece and played it at my senior recital? But she put a lot of faith in me, and I'm grateful that she did. Um, and so I wrote this piece, and initially, as I started writing the first movement, it wasn't even the first movement; it was the third movement that I started writing. And I, as an oboist, we don't really get to play much in the line of jazz, and jazz was an important part of my sort of my musical upbringing up to that point too. As a pianist, I played a lot in the jazz band in high school, and just had a real love for jazz. And so I always wished that there was more jazzy stuff for us to play on the oboe. And so I thought it might be a good opportunity to be able to bring that to the oboe myself. And so um, even in the third movement that I was writing, I was trying to construct with being informed by tall chords and some jazz harmonies, and um and then the first movement ended up being a fairly upbeat swing tune. um but what the I guess the piece ended up being about four personalities, and it was based on a personality test that had was popular at the time. Now there are a lot of other personality tests that define different things about your personality, like the Briggs Meyer, and there's some others that are really popular now. But at the time, it was Hartman personality test that was popular, and it defined personalities into different colors: yellow and white and blue and red. And so I actually wrote blue first, but then and I didn't even know that's what it was going to be about. I just kind of thought it sounded like I was trying to use some jazz chords and some tall chords, and I just thought it sounded sort of moody and blue and sad. And then it kind of sparked my sort of thought process of, oh, maybe this could be about, all of these different colors, and oh, there's personality colors. And so then it gave me a sort of launching point for the rest of the piece. And so I thought I would show you a little bit of that piece. This performance is by Sarah Roper. She's European oboist, and she just put together um, this recording not too long ago. I think she did a really nice job. I just need to find it. I thought I had pulled it up. I'm so sorry. Just give me a second. Okay, I guess it disappeared. Give me just 1 second. Pull it back up on YouTube. Okay, here we go. All right, I'm going to screen share. I will share with computer sound. Just let me know if you can't hear this. And I'm not going to play the whole thing, but I'll give you a little bit of an idea of what this first movement of this piece sounds like. And this was part of the piece that I wrote for my senior recital. Sorry, I'll start it over. It's just having a little bit of a delay. Here we go. Let's try that again. So I'll stop there, and then I'm going to stop the share. So that's a little bit of four personalities. And so I played it for my senior recital, and I really enjoyed the experience. And to me, I was like, oh, great, I met my goal. I wrote a piece for my senior recital, and I didn't really have a vision for what to do next with the piece. And my teacher was so wise and so supportive, and she suggested, she's like, well, hold on, what more can you do with it now? What's next? How can you promote this further? And she said, why don't you send it to Trevco Music Publishing and see what Trevor Kramer thinks about the piece, and maybe he'll want to publish the piece. And why don't you send it to Nancy Ambrose King? And Dr. King was the IDRS president at the time. And she said, Dr. King really enjoys playing new music, and maybe she'll take a liking to this piece and possibly perform it. And so I really didn't know either of these people very well at all. I had met Dr. King once when she came out to BYU, but I, of course, was a little apprehensive. But my teacher had confidence that this would be a good thing to do, so I decided to do it. And I sent the works out to Trevor Kramer and to Dr. King, and Trevor Kramer wanted to publish the piece, and Dr. King wanted to perform the piece, and she decided that she wanted to perform it at the International Double Reed Convention that was going to happen just in 2008, which was just a year later. And so that was a really meaningful thing to a place to have it performed, and I feel like it was a really great launching point for the next phases of what could happen next, and really started getting the ball rolling. But I'm especially thankful, well, to both of those people, to Trevor and to Nancy King, for taking a leap of faith on my music, and to my teacher especially for letting me write a piece for my senior recital, and then helping me to know what to do next, and just being such an extremely supportive mentor through all of my bachelor's and master's degree. So after Dr. King performed my piece at IDRS, slowly I started receiving commissions, and for composers, I'm sure you probably know what that is, but it's when somebody comes to you and proposes that they have an instrumentation in mind. They'd like you to write a piece for that instrumentation, and they want to pay you to write for that instrumentation. And so then that means that the composer has to start developing their fee table and what they're going to charge and different things. And again, I was so grateful for my mentor, Dr. Giovanetti, for helping me, because that was something that was another new terrain sort of thing, which I'm sure is every new composer feels that same way when they're first starting out. Like, oh, somebody wants to pay me to write music. I'm so excited. I don't know what to do, so it's a really it's a interesting sort of stepping off point. And so one of the first commissions that I did was an oboe and percussion work, which I'm actually going to be recording on this next album that I'm in the process of recording right now. We recorded 3 of the movements pre-COVID, so about a year ago, like right now, and then hadn't finished the 4th movement before everything shut down, and we're actually about to finish the 4th movement recording next in a week and a half, I think, is when we'll do it. So I'm really excited to have that finished. But I thought I would show you just a little bit of this piece, because gradually, as the instrumentations broadened, I think that it started helping me find my way into commissions that were for other instrumentations and into other sort of concert venues, until I gradually started writing for larger ensembles. So I'm going to share the screen again, and here is this is Rain Dance. Oh, did I share with computer sound? Let me just check really quick. I'm sorry. Yes, I did. Okay, good. All right. Now I need to find this again. I apologize. Boy, where did it go? Just give me 1 second. I'm going to stop the share once more. I apologize. Somehow this went somewhere, and I'm not sure where. There, it should be right there. I'm just going to escape and pull back up Zoom and screen share. I apologize as I'm talking to myself and trying to figure out my technology here. Okay. All right, here we go. I won't play the whole thing. I'm just going to show you a little bit of it. This is a year ago. We performed this a year ago at a recital I gave here at K-State. Okay, that's probably a good point to stop. So that was one of my first commissions. This was in like maybe 2010 or something like that. And then after that, they maybe started out kind of slow, where it was maybe one a year, and then gradually two a year. And at first, it was just sort of chamber music, and then it sort of branched out in instrumentation until I was doing maybe instruments that weren't. It didn't always involve oboe. Um, and my first orchestral commission was an oboe concerto, and that was um, in 2014, I think. And gradually it grew as things started being performed more at international conventions, and as these people who commissioned the works kind of promoted the works, and so I think it was the 2011 convention where Four Personalities was played again by Peter Cooper. And then in the 2014 convention, I played this piece, actually, Forecast, that I showed you just a little bit of. I played that in 2014 along with my teacher, Dr. Giovanetti, who played a piece that I wrote for her for oboe, bassoon, and piano. And we shared a recital in New York at the International Convention then. And then in 2016, the concerto that I just mentioned was performed at the 2016 convention. And around the same time, I think that I had a work that was played at the National Flute Convention. So because it involved oboe and flute and bassoon, so it sort of branched out to where it started being performed at other conventions. And so some of it was, by being performed in these other places, and some of it was just me gradually developing my own connections too, and by living in different places and working with different people. In 2016, by then I was at the University of Cincinnati. I was studying my doctorate, and I was in the Richmond Symphony. I was the associate principal of the Richmond Symphony, and my conductor learned that I composed, and he was curious about my compositions and asked to take a listen to a few of them because they were considering a commission, and so I sent him some of my samples of my works, and he decided that they wanted to commission me to write a work. And actually, the commission didn't happen until I moved here to Kansas. They were inquiring about it towards the end of my time there in Richmond Symphony. Actually, I was only in the Richmond Symphony for maybe a year or a year and a half, because I was only in Cincinnati for 2 years. But so in that, but I made a lot of really meaningful connections in that time. And every single person that you meet is not only a wonderful friend and colleague, a potential friend and colleague, but also a potential collaborator. And so all of these connections that you're making now are going to be so meaningful to your future. So I hope that you're taking opportunities to make meaningful connections. I know that's hard to do right now in COVID times, because it feels like all we are is like little boxes on a screen, but it's more than that. And there are still neat ways to make meaningful connections. And I've still had a lot of really meaningful music making experiences this past year, despite the unique circumstances. And I think in some ways it's helped us to be even more connected. I mean, look, we're in different states right now, and we can have a meaningful connection right here, right now. And so anyway, this commission for Richmond Symphony was my first orchestral commission that was not a concerto, and that didn't really have anything to do with the oboe, besides that the oboe was part of the ensemble. And it's called Changing Faces, and they premiered it in 2018. And I'm going to show you just a little bit of that, and I'll show you part of the last movement. So Changing Faces is kind of, I guess in a way, I mean, I feel like maybe it's part of the multifaceted career, but sometimes I feel like there's a lot of hats that we have to wear just as any given person. I mean, sometimes I feel like I'm wearing the professor hat, and sometimes I'm wearing the professor face, I guess, or if we're talking about changing faces, or the composer face, or the mother face, or there's so many different roles that we play. And sometimes we feel like we're trying to play them in synchronization. And sometimes that can be a difficult thing to do, to try to be so many things at once. And so I think that, in a way, this piece was a little bit of I guess, a hashing out of some of my feelings that way. And so the different movements are all based on the catchphrases or turns of phrase that have the word face in it. So the first movement is fresh face, and the second movement is facelift, and the third movement is blue in the face, and then the fourth movement is face the music, and the fifth movement is face off. So I will show you a little bit of face off. All right. I think I shared with computer sound. Please let me know if you can't hear it. I don't know why. Whoops. Okay, here we go. So that is the last movement of Changing Faces. This was premiered 2 years ago. And just a little bit before that, about the same time, maybe a year before that, I guess, I became acquainted with Alicia Lawyer, who is an oboist in the River Oaks Chamber Orchestra. She's the principal oboist there. And she has a really unique, multifaceted career. She is the CEO, actually, I do think the artistic director is what the name is, of the River Oaks Chamber Orchestra. Really, she's the founder of this orchestra, though. About 16 years ago, she decided that she wanted to put together an orchestra, and that this orchestra's mission was going to be really unique because it was going to be all based on trying to bring to light and bring to fruition new music. And so this is one of the leading groups in the country, really, for commissioning new music. And they're the number one group in the country right now for performing and commissioning works by women composers, and the number two group in the country for commissioning and performing works by people of color. So that's a really significant, awesome thing that ROCO is doing, which is what they go by now, ROCO, instead of River Oaks Chamber Orchestra. I think initially it was River Oaks Chamber Orchestra because of the region of Houston that they're in, the River Oaks area, but now they go by ROCO. And so Alicia Lawyer started this wonderful orchestra, and they have now commissioned, so I said they are in their 16th season, and they've commissioned more than 110 works since the beginning of the group, which is a really big deal. And one of the amazing things about this group too, as I was learning more about ROCO from Alicia, is that it's from people. It's not even necessarily, so in COVID times, you would think that something like this could be a really dangerous thing, because what about ticket sales? How are we going to sell tickets? I mean, if we only go virtual, like what are we going to do? But they've given all of their music for free online, and they don't really base their budget plan isn't on ticket sales. It's on grants and donations, and getting their community to believe in the product, and want to be able to just donate to it. And so she is an amazing fundraiser, and she really believes in the mission of the group, as do the members of the group. And so they're really able to get other people to want to support the amazing things that they're doing. And so they really haven't suffered financially during what you would think would be a really trying financial time. I know it is for many organizations, but they've been able to do just fine because of the way that the progressive way, I guess, that they're going about the arts. And so anyway, in 2017, I got to know Alicia when she sent me an email about the possibility of a commission for ROCO. And ROCO, they have a concert series that is the full orchestra concert series, and it's a chamber orchestra, so it's like 40-piece orchestra. They also have concert series that are based on chamber music, so they're doing a combination of, like, it's a flex group where they have flexed instrumentation. Sometimes they're the full group, sometimes they're the chamber group, and so it allows them to commission large works or small works, which I think is really neat. And so they wanted to commission a work for oboe, clarinet, and bassoon. And that was an instrumentation I hadn't written for yet. And so I was really excited at the prospect of writing for Alicia. And Alicia actually found out about what the work that I was doing because of her bassoonist colleague, Kristen Wolf Jensen, who had heard one of my pieces at IDRS. So again, I was really grateful for all of these connections that stemmed from gradually having people perform the works, presenting them at conventions and different things, so that it could just spread. It could gradually, by word of mouth, spread. And so Alicia commissioned me to write this trio. And then a couple of years later, just this past year, actually, she inquired about the possibility of having me be the composer in residence for their 2016 season, which is what I've been doing this year. Doesn't mean that I've been residing there, but I've been working closely with ROCO for the past year, and they commissioned 3 new works, 2 that were for chamber ensemble and 1 for full orchestra. So the 3 works that they commissioned, one was for oboe and vibraphone, and one was for a woodwind sextet, which is one woodwind quintet with piano. And then the last one was a symphony concertante. It's a solo for, it's a concerto for flute, oboe, clarinet, bassoon soloist, and orchestra. And this one that she commissioned, that they commissioned, she wanted it to be based on the Gerald McDermott book, Musicians of the Sun. And in Gerald McDermott's book, he tells us of the Aztec tale of how the world gets its color and light. And so I found it just really neat to learn about Aztec culture and beliefs, and really try to immerse myself as much as I could into what I could learn about that. And so this has kind of been one of my big projects this past year, has been writing these pieces for Rocco, and especially this large scale orchestra work. They just premiered it a week and a half ago. Yeah, well, it'll be 2 weeks tomorrow, actually, I believe, in Houston. And I was there for the premiere, and they didn't premiere to any full audience. It was only streamed, and we actually weren't even in a concert hall. It was a big studio, actually. It was more like a big studio where they recorded it. But some of the unique things that they did that I was really excited about, I was trying to follow the book as closely as I possibly could. As I was reading the book, I was trying to come up with what motives I might create for these different characters, for the sun, for wind, for all of the musicians of the sun. And I also noticed that these musicians of the sun, they played the rattle and they played the hand drum and the conch shell. So I was hoping that I could have some conch shell played. And I also hoped that at the end, when everybody came together to play this lullaby that was full of optimism as the world was getting its color and light, that we could have an Aztec drum that would be able to be played in the piece. And so I did write in the score, because it seems kind of ambitious to maybe see if an orchestra can get a conch shell and somebody that can play a conch shell and then also an Aztec drum. So I said, well, just in case somebody can play the conch shell part on their instrument, just play this pitch. And actually that was something that was kind of interesting. When we got the conch shell, Alicia could play the conch shell, but the conch shell did not play the pitch that I hoped that it would play. So I just rewrote the chords when we were there. I just adjusted the chords that the piano played so it could match what the conch shell could play, because the conch shell wanted to play B natural. So we had to make sure that the chords could go with B natural. So and then but the Aztec drum was really unique, because I thought that it was probably going to be difficult to find. And so I mentioned that congas would work well as a substitute, but they were able to find one. They actually had a group who did a reading of the book, who also had an Aztec drum, and it's a spiritual thing to them, actually. And they told Rocco initially, you can't borrow it because the spirit of our grandfather is in it. Actually, it was carved from this tree, and the spirit of our grandfather is in it. And so we'll lend you this other drum that doesn't have this, that doesn't have this spiritual aspect to it, but we're not going to lend this Aztec drum. And so Rocco's like, that's just fine. Whatever, we're just grateful that you're willing to lend us this. And so then when somebody from Rocco went to pick up this drum, they ended up saying, actually, yes, you can borrow this drum that the spirit is normally in. The spirit isn't in it right now. And so you can borrow the drum right now. And so they even had the Aztec drum, which I was just so excited about. And the sound that, if you, in person, at least, the sound that drum made really almost was a spiritual experience. It was really moving and deep and huge, and exceeded expectations for sure. And so I was really excited about their performance. They just did a phenomenal job. And I thought I would show you just the end of this performance, where the lullaby, where the world is getting its color and light. So let me just pull it up here, and I'll screen share. And let's see here. Sorry, I'm having a delay here. There we go. All right. So that's the Aztec drum, which I think the Aztec drum steals the show in that segment. So anyway, one of the things that I love so much about my job right now, and I guess the balance between composition and performance and the multifaceted aspects of it, is that every day is a new adventure in so many ways. And I love it so much. So like I said, about 2 weeks ago, I was in Houston with Rocco, and I was working with the orchestra, and we were trying to just fine tune things for this wonderful performance that they gave. And about 2 weeks before that, they also performed my other 2 works that I wrote for them. And on the same day that they were premiered, I was tuning in actually online. I didn't go in person for that premiere, but it happened in between a Topeka Symphony rehearsal and a Topeka Symphony concert. So we were doing Brahms 2. So I had Brahms 2 rehearsal. I got to tune into Rocco's premiere of the piece, and then I got to play Brahms 2 with Topeka Symphony. And so it was just an example of one of those kind of multifaceted days. And then this, like I said, a couple weeks ago, I was in Rocco working with working with the orchestra. And then I came back, and I've been working with my students here at K-State on the variety of things that they're working on in music theory and oral skills. And my grad student, who's almost finished with her big graduate report, and she's actually studying the composer Acer Vanson, who's a Turkish oboist and composer, and doing a review of her wonderful works. And I'm also preparing right now for an album that I'm recording. So I recorded one of the sessions just this last Saturday, and then I'll record one of the other sessions tomorrow. And I had a rehearsal with my collaborative pianist today. So it's always really interesting. There's so many different things going on, and I love that about the work. And I feel like, at least for me, my experience has been that being more informed as a performer helps me to be a better composer, and being more like doing more with composition helps me to be a better performer, because I'm understanding my music, that I'm coming to my music with maybe the aspect of well, how can I making it your own really feels like something sort of like that's really important, because as a composer, you're constantly trying to make something your own, literally, because you're creating it from the ground up. But if you come to different works that you're working on of other composers' compositions with the same attitude, how can I make this my own? And then I think it's going to make you more deliberate about planning your expression and making sure that you're really adamant about that. And so I also just am grateful for the multifaceted characteristics of the work, because it keeps me constantly engaged and inspired and excited. And so anyway, that's a little bit about what I'm doing right now. For the future, I guess, for this coming year, one of the other things that I also did this past year, I had received a grant or a commission from the Barlow Endowment to compose a cello concerto, and it initially was going to be premiered also this February, but with COVID, that group kind of did a smaller scale orchestra season, and so we're going to do it in February 22. So that will be premiered in February 22. And I have a couple of other chamber works that I'll be working on, some oboe works, and then some for other instrumentations, trumpet and viola, and so and then this album is a big thing that I'll be working on this next year, like trying to go through all of the edits and get it just so I'm ready to release it in the summertime. So anyway, that's a little about me, and I cannot wait to hear all of your music and take a listen to it and talk about your wonderful works. So does anybody have any questions?
Well, thank you so much for sharing all of that with us and for playing so much of your music for us. Questions? They're speechless.
I do have a question.
Yeah, Matt.
Hi, nice to meet you. First,
Nice to meet you.
I was wondering how you balanced uh, your personal works alongside your commissions and how that kind of worked out, you know. Um, I guess, uh, did you find yourself putting more time into one or the other? What was that balance between the two?
So are you talking about if you're writing a work for yourself versus if you're writing a work on commission?
Yes, exactly.
Oh, that's a good question, actually. So my in the beginning, I was just really writing pieces for myself because I wasn't writing on commission. But once I started writing on commission, so Four Personalities was written in 2007, and I wrote that for myself so I could play it um, for my senior recital. And then as I started, well, and I should say, like, right around, my son was born in 2007. And so I had a really young kids from 2007 to 2010, were when my two children were born. And so I feel like it was good in a way that the commission started out slow. Oops, sorry, that was the piano. I just hit it with my elbow. Sorry. Um, because I was pretty busy at that time with my children, my young children. Um, but I it took me a while to write a piece for myself again, because once I started receiving commissions, I felt like that was really the only time I only had time to write the commissioned work and also balance my schooling. Like, if when I was in my master's degree, I started my master's degree in 2012, and my kids then were 3 and 4 years old when I started my master's degree. So I really felt like I only had time to write the commissioned works. And the next time I wrote something that was really for myself was when I was in my doctorate in like 10 years later in 2017. I finished the work in 2017. It was the collision etudes. And I wanted to write, it was my doctoral project, actually. And I wanted to write a work for solo oboe. And this time I was like, this time I'm going to write a piece for myself and I'm going to carve out that time. And I was taking composition lessons as part of my cognate too. And that was my project for my composition lessons for that semester. And then the other, half of the semester or so. Um, and so it's kind of tricky. Max, what's your primary instrument?
Oh, a saxophone. I
Okay.
do.
So do you like to write music for yourself too? Write music
Oh,
for yourself?
yes. A little bit, yeah.
That's awesome. And probably you're trying to write works for other instrumentations too. And one of the things that I thought was, I felt lucky about it was the first commissions that I was receiving were for an instrumentation that I could also play. So eventually, even though I was initially writing this for somebody else and the exclusivity period was, they were going to premiere it and they were going to have the year to 2 years of exclusivity, however much we decided was on the commissioning agreement. Eventually I was going to get to play it too. And it's not like I wasn't playing it as I was trying to write it. It's just I was not going to perform it until they had their exclusivity period for a certain amount of time. And it ended up working out that I've been able to play all of it, and I feel like I found myself in all of those different pieces too, even though initially they were written for somebody else that I connected to them. But it wasn't it. I mean, I really only a couple of times I felt like that I set aside the time that it was just for myself, that I was writing it for the purpose of me performing it. And so I'm actually doing that right now too. I'm writing another solo oboe work right now, that I started when I was in Houston. And my hope, if it all works out all right, if I finish it, is that this will be a work that I put on my album, if I can get the timing right, if it fits on the album. But my hope is that it will be a work that I also put on my album. But I think that it's an important thing, though, to carve out time to do that, to just kind of like, I guess, play in the sandbox of composition a little bit, or feel like you have the opportunity to write for yourself or do something for yourself. And so that's a really good question, and it is a tricky balance sometimes, I feel like. the projects sometimes, they feel like the thing that has the deadline is the thing that I have to work on next. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
How about if we go to Matt, and so I sent you some of his works, and I think I sent you, no, there wasn't a sound file with that, was there, Matt? Okay.
So Matt, this is your work, right? For guitar, right?
That's me.
Okay,
Mhm.
I am so excited to take a look at this, and I already took a gander at it too. I wonder if you could tell me about your conceptualization for the work.
So, or in the performance notes, or I'm excited that you're like currently Kansas based, because so much of my personal origins are like Kansas related, even though I've never like lived there. Like all my family lives there. I've spent like a lot of time in this like whole prairie zone. So there's basically a whole collection of pieces I'm working on that are like some intersection between like folk music and contemporary classical music. And the elevator pitch is like textures and language from folk music filtered through like developmental language from like minimalism and post-minimalism, which is way fancier than the music actually is. But
Well, I don't know if you know this composer's work, but I mean, what you have here is a very different interpretation of the same sort of idea. But I don't know if you're familiar with the work by Michael Torkey.
oh yeah.
But his concerto Sky for violin and orchestra is sort of the same idea. It's not necessarily like the prairie and open plains sort of music, but it's a merging of bluegrass and minimalist ideas. And so I think it's not to say that they're going to be the same thing at all, because different composers' interpretations of where two things intersect are always so different. And it's one of the things that is the coolest about composition and different composers and the individual aspects of just human beings. But I just think that it's an interesting conceptualization. So I think that's great.
Thank you.
Yeah. So it looks to me like you have specified the different tunings of the guitar, right? That this guitar is tuned to this and this and this and this.
Mm-hmm. Before we get too far into this, would it be helpful for me to screen share a score for everybody?
Yes, it would be
Okay.
very helpful. I think that would be fantastic. Here,
Let me pull that up
Put
real
it in the
fast.
chat. It's in the chat if anyone wants to open it there.
Oh, perfect. That's great. Do you
Go ahead
want
and share it too?
Okay. Do you want me to share it, or would you rather share it? It might be helpful if you shared it actually, and I can make it so that you're a can I make it so he's a co-host? I don't know.
I think it's set up so anyone can share.
Okay. Do you want to share it?
Sure.
Okay.
Say a little prayer to the Zoom gods. All right. Can everyone see this?
Yep.
Cool. All right. So, yeah. I think the thing that bears explaining before getting too deep into it is basically the mode of development, which really calls for players to be improvisers and to be like really engaged in listening to one another and shaping things together, which is why there's so much box material in this way. It's really texturally based, I would say. And yeah, and players kind of find the shapes, or players should find shapes and like endpoints of phrases together.
I think this is so neat. And I've had a couple of experiences recently as a performer playing works like this. It's a totally new and I think it's a really great listening experience. You're being hyper listeners to the other members of your ensemble, which is a really invigorating experience. And your sort of figures are a ricochet effect or a response to their statements too, and it also is a really captivating thing to the audience too. A year ago, I played a piece by Rena Ismail. I really love her composition. If you don't know her composition, it's fantastic. But she includes a lot of Indian aspects to her composition style, and it's a very improvisatory sounding as well. And she uses boxes and things like this, and also specifications of how many seconds you should be waiting before this figure comes, and you're reading off of a score to perform the work. And the audience really really enjoyed it too, and to me that's a really important part of all of this too, is making sure that I especially enjoy it when I feel like there's a synergy between the performer, composer, audience. I think that that's always really exciting. So, but one of the hardest things about a work like this is playing off of the score. And nowadays, I don't think it's such a challenge because many people are playing off of devices, and so that they can turn pages with feet. But I'm assuming that everybody would be playing from a score, so they would be doing the same thing too, right?
My hope is that, so I haven't made parts for this. Making parts, the unsung, most challenging and time-consuming part of all this. My hope is that the parts are coherent by themselves. So my hope is that this is not being played from the score, and everything can just be moved via like the numbered cues, and then like a big nod for Q1, big nod for Q2, big
Yeah.
old nod for Q3, that kind of thing. But I'm not there yet. Like this hasn't been in front of any player's eyes yet.
Wow, that's so exciting. So what's your sort of timeline? When's your intention to get this in front of a player's eyes?
I think sometime in the late summer or fall the will be the time for that. I'm not exactly sure. Like, I a little bit wanted to ask you about where recording lives in your practice, because recording is a big part of my practice as a composer. Like I'm way less of a pencil paper kind of composer, and way more of a more in production, more in just trying to like set up instructions that can be interpreted and recorded kind of composer.
Right.
But yeah, so TLDR, probably early fall is a realistic time to maybe be in the studio for this.
Great. I think that that's really neat. It's interesting. Everybody's processes and paths are so different too, because I kind of improvisation. I'm assuming, do you play guitar?
Yeah.
Okay, so you probably have played all of these parts, and one of the ways that you developed this was because you were sort of improvising a figure that you thought, okay, well, this is going to sound nice on top of this at this moment, and then maybe this figure almost looks like bird song that's happening in Guitar 3 on like the second stanza, and dun, 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 dun. Yeah, I really
No,
like
yeah.
that. It does sound like bird song, and which would very much be something that was a prairie sound, so I love that's coming through. And improvisation is a big part of my process too, and I think it just sometimes it happens in different orders for people too, or how it makes itself manifest in a score just looks a little bit different for everybody. So when I start composing, I will frequently go to the piano, but it's not always the piano. Sometimes it's the oboe, but I'll frequently go to some instrument. Sometimes it's a different instrument. My husband plays percussion, and so we have a marimba downstairs. So sometimes I'll go to the marimba if I want to change it up and just try to call upon a different sound. And if I tried to improvise something on the guitar, it'd probably be in 1 or 2 chords. So that might not be very creative because I don't know really anything on the guitar. But I think that there's something still healthy about, trying to spark, I guess, ideas, and by trying something new and different. And so, but I frequently go to the piano though when I'm improvising in the beginning, and come up with some motives, kind of like what you have here. I feel like what you have in these boxes are like this motive or this motive or this motive that you're overlaying, and I think it's going to be such a really cool effect. And so and then once I have my motives, I kind of, in my mind, I'm starting to piece together how this might work in a form also, and then I go down and start putting it together in the software. And so I might have, now I would imagine that it's pretty hard to get any sort of a MIDI something that will play this. It's probably not, right? Not
Yeah.
really possible. So it's all in imagining right now what it would sound like. And then, are you going to play all 4 guitar parts, or do you have other people who are going to play guitar with you so you can perform this?
So I'm gonna demo it, like multi-tracking all 4 guitar parts. But I think the ideal version of this is with 4 players in a room.
Yeah, I think that would be so neat and so effective. And while I know that the number system is going to be really valuable for people, you have things that happen kind of slightly before or after the number system. I don't think it would be the end of the world to play from a score for people. When I've seen pieces like this, actually, to me, it was really informing to see what everybody else was doing. Just like when I'm playing a work in an orchestra, I'm constantly writing in my music, like, oh, clarinet comes in there, French horn comes in there. If it's not already in my music, I'm writing it in everywhere because I want as much information as I possibly can so I can play as informed of a performance as I possibly can. So if they played from a score, obviously they need to play from a device. They need to play from something where they could turn a page with their foot or something like that. But it could be very informing for them to be able to see what's happening in the other parts so that they knew when to start. And then gradually they won't need that information so much more as you develop your own rhythm, because that's the other thing that happens with improvisatory works, is that it starts to evolve into something that kind of has its own breath of life, and might have even more space here or there than you originally intended, but that how it's settled is really exciting. So this looks like it's going to be so neat. So do you have any questions in particular about it? About the process?
I guess if I had any questions for you, it would be how like how comprehensible are how comprehensible do you think, for example, these notations of begin games, like begin like
Can
kind of
you
throughout
zoom
this
into
piece.
that right there,
Oh,
to the words
sure.
right there? Is that okay? Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Begin game with guitar 3. I love that it's a game. I think that that's great. You lead them with repeated triadic chord. They respond with triadic punctuation, cutting you off. I like that. So you play bum, 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 and they cut you off before you've finished it. Is that the intent?
Yeah, that's the idea. I think my general question here is how comprehensible is that style of like describing a sound?
Does it
Because
make
it
sense? Yes, it does. And I've seen stuff like that in music before, and I think that they would know what to do. Absolutely.
okay.
And all you really have to do too, once you have something like this, is to have somebody do it for the first time and to have a recording of that so people know what that means. And then then you've developed your own form of notation, right? And constantly composers are doing that too. I mean, developing their own form of notation. I wrote something in that piece for oboe, bassoon, and clarinet that I wrote for Rocco. I needed to, I had some percussion that they were playing at the same time as they were playing their instrument too. I had like the oboe playing a foot pedal that was kind of bonking a wood block, and then they also played some bottles that were tuned to different pitches and stuff like that. And so I think that one of the cool things as a composer is just to try to find your own notation and to find a new sound that hasn't been created before. And that's what I think you're seeking right here. And this, I think what you have written is very explanatory. I think it's gonna explain to them exactly what they need to know to do. So if anything, if you want that guitar 3 to cut off the guitar 1, if you moved the chord a little bit to the left so it looked like it happened in conjunction with the last one of those, I think that might be helpful. You could even sort of draw a line. There could be a line that connected, what happened from guitar 1 to guitar 3, and perhaps that would make a little bit more sense too for the first time. And then your black lines that say continue doing this would be enough, and I'm assuming that they're just continuing to do that in a sort of improvisatory nature, not with regard to any sort of sense of time, except for just paying attention to when the next person comes in with their pick scrape figure or something like that. Right?
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, and there, or just for reference, there
will sound like wind, right? It's supposed to sound like wind, maybe.
I wasn't thinking about it in
Kansas.
Yeah, it's a bunch of windy, grassy pieces, that is for sure. For reference, that game lasts until here when the instruction changes with a blunt guitar 1 is no longer listening to you. Stop trying to please guitar 1.
I think that that's great. You know what especially is going to make this convincing too, and maybe, I don't know if this is part of your conceptualization for the piece, but I think sometimes the physical expression aspects, if you can get buy-in from your performers just in how they're communicating it from a theatrical standpoint, if there's some sort of a recognition on their faces that they're trying to do something, or trying that it is a game. And you'll see this, even, it doesn't have to be like the theater, but you'll see this amongst jazz musicians too. Don't you ever get the sense that when two people are playing jazz, that it's almost like a game? It is when they're trading fours, right? When they're trading fours, it's totally a game. You have them playing something and somebody else is responding with something that was informed by what happened in the first 4 that the other performer played, and back and forth they go, constantly being informed by each other until the whole band comes back in. So and I think that body language of responding to each other, if that exists in this guitar performance, I think it's going to be so effective and so much fun for people to watch. And so if you can get buy-in from your performers to do that, and to play off of each other, and understand that it is a game of call and response kind of, then I think that's going to be really effective. So yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Morris. Why don't we move on to someone else? Dr. Mueller, she has scores from Robbie and Ryan and Yoshio. Who would you like to go next?
Well, who's the most eager? Raise your hand. Jump in.
All eager. Okay, Ryan.
Okay, Ryan raised his hand first that I saw.
Awesome. That's great. Ryan, I have your combined scores right here. And I think what I have sound score wise is for Nocturne. Does that sound right?
Yeah. If you want to do it like how we just did it for Matt, I can share the screen and share the sound, but I mean, it's up to you.
Absolutely. I think that would be fantastic. Let's do that. That would be great.
Okay. Awesome. Yeah, let me pull it Sibelius here, super quick. Okay, got that one.
You know, I think
This
Zoom
one.
serves composition and composition lessons pretty well, actually. All of the screen share stuff is so nice. I mean, Zoom's hard for oboe lessons. I've really thought that there's difficult things about Zoom for oboe lessons and getting the sound right. But last semester I taught the composition students here while my colleague was on sabbatical, and we were on Zoom 100% of the time last semester, and it actually still worked pretty well because we could see the same things as each other. We could hear the same things as each other. So that was pretty great. It's only tricky when you're trying to start putting things together with live performers. And so
Right.
that obviously gets a little bit tricky. So yeah.
There we go. Can you see the screen okay?
Yes, perfect.
Cool. Let's see. Oh, whoops. No. Find my little. There we go. Okay. Cool.
It's beautiful. It's really lovely.
Thank you.
So I'm curious, oh, sorry, I should have applauded. So
Oh,
lovely. So what's your conceptualization of what happens next? Is this the end of this movement, or is there more that comes next, or is there another movement that follows it? And it sounds like a kind of a half cadence that leads to A minor, but you started C major, and so I'm curious about what you think happens next, or maybe you don't know yet.
I think probably it will stay in A minor for a little bit, but I'll probably have like a different harmonic progression, and kind of maybe play with this you know small like rhythmic figure that keeps on repeating in the cello,
Right.
and maybe do something like that, and then yeah, probably later modulate to a different key.
Great. That's wonderful. So there is a continuation. This continues on to something else that's going to happen later before it finishes off. I think that that's so great. And it's really lovely. One of the things that I was thinking about, well, first of all, maybe I'll ask you first before I put, ideas in your mind. Do you have any composers in particular that you're thinking of when you're writing in a style like this? Or like pieces that you're hearkening back to or thinking of sound wise?
So my neighbor is actually a cellist, and I guess it was last year, sometime during lockdown and everything, that he finally like hounded me just to listen to the Bach cello suites, and so it was kind of an inspiration from that. I just to have an instrument just kind of stand alone by itself and just cycle through all of these different kind of key centers and everything, and just have like all this power in just one cello. I was really inspired by that. So
As was exactly what I was guessing, that this is Bach cello suite, but it's not Bach cello suite. It's Ryan Martin and inspiration derived from an experience listening to Bach Cello Suite, right? And it's really beautiful. And Bach is so great, so multifaceted in his own way too. His wealth of composition is just insane. His keyboard works. There's so many examples of the varieties of different styles of Bach. So we have the prelude, this one that goes. Sorry. There we go. I was in the wrong register. And it's all about chord shift, right? I think I got that last chord wrong, but but it's all about shifting from one chord to another ever so slightly, ever so subtly, and kind of similarly to his cello suite. And in music theory, just a class or two ago, we were talking about Bach because we were talking about his inventions in fugues, and they're all built on these little tiny motives. These little motives that repeat over and over and over, and then eventually he kind of sort of layers them on top of each other until they become this big, amazing thing. And then there are his orchestral works. There's the St. Matthew's Passion, which is just, this awe-inspiring thing, and his cantatas, which he wrote one a week for how long? So long. Sorry, I think there's somebody singing in the hall. I'm at the school right now. You're singing in the hall. So I apologize. You're going to hear a little bit of singing in the hall in the background. I guess things are happening here. It's pretty strange to know that there are people out there singing right now when we're in COVID times. But I think, with vaccines rolling out, people are getting overzealously excited. So anyway, I received mine actually the other day. I was excited about that. But so I think that this is just delightful, and I could hear your inspiration from Bach coming through, but in your own unique way, and in your own unique freshness of chord shifts and changes. So one of the things I was thinking, and this is still pretty early on, I know you have different places that you're going in this piece still, and so there's still notes that you're going to put to the page, but if you ever get out your air cello and your air bow, I think that's going to be a really helpful thing to do. Do you play cello at all? I don't play cello at all, actually.
Just barely. I have one, and I'm learning, so just a little bit.
That's great. That's super. I don't play it at all, but I just finished a cello concerto, and I definitely did a lot of studying in my orchestration books and everything, and I was on the phone with the cellist a lot, trying to, kind of ask him, well, what about this and what about this, and then there was one figure where I was trying to do this kind of arpeggiation thing, and he called back and he said, this doesn't really work in this key, but if you put it in this key, it would work. And so I said, okay, let's put it in this key instead. So there's a lot of trial and error sometimes, and I appreciate performers who are willing to take a stab at things and then also tell you when it's going to work better if you just shift it ever so slightly. But as you get out your air cello, one of the things that's going to, I'm just, holding up nothing in the air, but I try to think through my bowing that way too. And I think that that's an important thing to start getting on the page, because bowing is going to be a really meaningful part of your composition process in writing for strings. And I see that you have some bowing already, like from the BCB in measure 14, 15, and then maybe you want it similarly in measure 16 that way. I'm not sure, but you might even ask your cello friend to try and play the groupings a couple of different ways for you too. Like, do you like ba da ba, or do you like ba da da bum bum, or do you like ba da 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 dum? And I think it's really helpful to just know what that sounds like. And so I feel like when I started writing for strings, then when I was in orchestra rehearsals, like I was so distracted by just trying to watch them and figure out what they were doing and watch their bows so I could learn, because I felt like I had so much to learn about bowing. Because for woodwind players, the slur means that's when you tongue or when you don't tongue, you know? And so, and it also indicates your phrasing, where you're blowing to. But the bowing is an important part of the phrasing, but their phrases aren't going to be as small as those slurs that indicate bowing. You know, their phrase is they're going to phrase forward further. And so your dynamics can kind of describe to the string players what you intend for your phrasing, but then those bowings can help them know what they need to, the slurring groupings can help them know what they need to do with their bow. So I think that that's going to be a really helpful next step for you. And I think that that your strings coming in at 29 is really nice. Do you think that the other strings will stay in as you move on to your next section of the piece?
I think so. Probably so. Yeah. I guess probably just need to find out what I'm going to have them do. If it's going to be, you know, just kind of like adding like a layer of harmony above, like sort of a continued, line in the cello, or if they're actually, maybe going to switch it up a little bit and give the melody to the violins or the viola, something like that instead.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that changing voicings, that's one of the magical things about writing for 4 different strings, is that you kind of create a super instrument where you have, all of this different expansive range that you can use, but it's also color shifts too. And strings are so versatile. They can do so many things with their sounds. There's pits, there's playing on the bow, there's like the off the bow sort of spiccato sounds, and there's they have like really unique things that they can do when they're playing on the bridge and different things. So I think that one of the things that you might find, and it depends on the quality of sounds that you're going for, but sometimes we associate, I think that we can come up with a misconception that some of these sounds are only for when we want to sound scary, in music or something. Like some of the screechy sounds are only for when we want to sound scary. But there's actually some really unique ethereal and glistening and beautiful sounds that you can create with strings in using, I don't even know if we call them extended technique anymore, because it feels like it's not really extended anymore. It's what they're called upon to do all of the time. Just like for oboists, like it seems like circular breathing and double tonguing, where we used to call them extended techniques. It's kind of it has a common place in the repertoire and in the daily technique usage that we are called upon to do. So sometimes I Google when I'm writing for different instruments. I will just Google extended techniques on that instrument so I can hear all of the different kind of qualities that they can make. I wrote a piece about a year and a half ago for a contrabass flute, which I'd actually never even seen in real life at the time. But my colleague, she teaches at Florida State, and their school had just gotten a new contrabass flute, and so she wanted a solo piece for contrabass flute. And so I knew that flutes are very versatile in some of the like sort of harmonics and a variety of percussive sounds that they can make when they begin their pitches. And but I didn't know all of the capabilities there, so I definitely was doing a lot of Google search to find some videos that show the variety of different sounds. I do the same thing when I'm writing for percussion and try to Google, well, what are the different sounds that crotales can make? And let's just, even though my husband's a percussionist, we don't really have crotales laying around the house. And so actually, I mean, years ago, before there was this really easy access to all these sort of things on YouTube, I would go with him to the school. He teaches, he's a band teacher. And so I'd go to the school and be like, can you play this one for me? Can you play this one for me? Just play this one for me, when I was writing my first oboe and percussion piece. But now there's so much online. And so all we really have to do is a search, and we'll be able to get all the different sounds that a cello can do. And And I think that that's really informing. So I think you're off to a great start. It's a beautiful piece. I love the subtlety and the chord changes. I think that that's going to be really unique. And one of my composition teachers at CCM told me to remember that I've already written enough, like usually in the first section of the piece, I've already written enough to kind of base the whole entire piece off of what I have right there. So to try and utilize, instead of feeling like I have to reinvent the wheel when I'm going on to the next section, to try and utilize what I have, because what you have right here is a beautiful, beautiful ostinatos. But think of the unique things that could happen if you took them into a new key, if you changed the value, if you changed the meter, if you, oh, sorry, I keep on hitting things. If you inverted them, or if you maybe changed which part of the measure you had the half note reside on. So all of those little teeny shifts are still utilizing the same idea that you have, but kind of taking it so that you have just enough of it to harken back to what you have in the beginning, but it's also incorporating enough new that when you're going to that new section, your listeners going to feel like you've opened a new door for them, but they can still kind of hear the music that was happening in that from the hallway behind them where they were from. So anyway, yeah, great. I think it's going to be a delightful piece. So good luck. And do you have any questions?
Gosh, yeah, no, I mean, I was trying to take notes. I think that gives me, I mean, plenty of ideas for the next part, because I had gotten this part to a point where I was, happy with it. And then I said, okay, now what do I do to not screw it up? So, so yeah,
You're not
this is
going to
great.
screw it up. And the great thing is that we can always erase, or sometimes when I feel like I went and sometimes I write something and I feel like I entered a door I actually didn't want to enter. I was like, oh, that went somewhere I didn't want to. So then the great thing about a software system like that is I can just take all of that chunk and copy and paste it to way later in the piece where I decide to use it or not. And then sometimes I just create a whole new document and say, well, these were ideas that I thought I was going to like, but didn't like for this piece, but maybe I'll like them later. And then I save them for later, like food storage or something like that. I don't know. and then you can still find the idea that you feel like really gives voice to the piece that you're trying to create right here. So you go down a door, or go down a hallway you don't want to, you can always turn around. So
Yeah,
Morris, thank you so much. I'm afraid we have run out of time, and I wish we could have more time with you. But we're so happy you came today and shared
Thank
your
you so
story
much.
and your knowledge with us. I know there were a couple of composers that sent scores that we didn't get to, so.
I would love to I will make sure that I look through these scores and I'll send some feedback and make sure that I take listen to them and over the weekend, and then send this back to your teachers and so that they can send it to you. It all looks like it's just wonderful work, and it's been really wonderful to be able to get to know all of you and your music. And I can't wait to hear about the wonderful things that you do with your music in the future. So.
And I'm looking forward to playing your new oboe pieces that you talked about.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you so much. And that was very generous of you to offer to look at the scores that we didn't get to. So if you want to send any notes to me, I can pass them on.
And if anybody else has anything that they want to share or show, I would be delighted to take a look and talk with you about it. So thank you so much. And it's been really wonderful to get to know all of you. Thanks for your support and your kindness and your warm welcome. And good luck, everybody, and happy writing.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Take care.